This was our first year that Oklahoma Gardening had ever tried a home video garden contest, and we really didn't know what to think or what to expect as far as the quality of entries or the number. And we were very pleased. We got a lot of great educational ideas. And before we show you some of those, I want to be sure and give thanks to our sponsors, who was Smith Farm and Garden, who took a lot of time and energy and also had some great prizes for our winners. And also, I'd like to thank the county extension offices who offered the applications to those who were interested. And of course, we want to be sure and thank our judges. And those judges were Dr. Richard Payne, Mr. Dutch Bellinghouse, and Mr. Fred LaCrone, all of Stillwater. And they put in a lot of time and had a lot of worries trying to pick those winners, and they did a great job. And all three of them are very qualified because they're retired from the horticulture industry and from being a professor here at the university in the Department of Horticulture. So now I'd like to show you a little bit of some of those winning entries, and of course we went to visit with the first place winners as well.
Here's an idea I got from Oklahoma Gardening, some sunflower seeds. I planted these and they have not headed out yet, but I thought the children would enjoy that. Here, Cindy is showing a pumpkin. This is another tip I got from Oklahoma Gardening. I thought the children would enjoy planting some pumpkins, and I watched last year's scene when they took a nail and scratched their name in the pumpkin, allowing the scarring to kind of personalize the pumpkin. The children seem to take an increased interest in the garden when they have things like this of their own that's in the garden.
We're at the home of our first place winner in Category 1, which I'll remind you is the edible category. And this is the home of Mr. and Mrs. Stephen Lacy. And welcome to Oklahoma Gardening.
Thank you.
It's really a pleasure to be here. And now we want to visit with Steve and ask his advice and get some opinions on some of the educational things that you sent in on your video. And I think the first thing is that we need to bring to the attention of everyone is your raised bed gardening. Tell me a little bit, Steve, about your concept and what you've done here.
Well, with the raised bed, basically by bringing in compost and so forth, and it makes the soil a lot richer, you can plant things a lot closer and get more produce out of the limited space and so forth that I have here.
And one thing I've noticed, you've actually used, instead of landscape timbers and posts and those kinds of things, you've used brick that complement your house. Has that been successful for you?
Sure. I think it makes it a lot more attractive and so forth, the side appeal and so forth.
Now, is this something that you've done yourself, or would you have extra bricks left over, or what?
Yes. Actually, I built a little shop, and then I had some bricks left over, and I thought it would be nice to do this, and I just happened to have enough, and it kind of keeps the weeds out, and it looks attractive.
Well, speaking of weeds, a lot of people get discouraged, Steve, because of the weed problems in gardens. Now, you are using another innovative way here to keep weeds under control. Tell me about that project.
Well, I have some carpet down here, and it works real well in the sense that the weeds can't grow up through it. The rain and so forth comes down, and it has a tendency to keep the warmth in early, and so it seems like the vegetables get a good start that way. To start off with, I just put that down and kind of kill the grass when I first established this area. And I thought, well, I can just poke holes in this, and the tomatoes can come up through it, and it's worked out real well.
How about watering through the carpet? What do you do for that?
What I have these drip hoses and so forth, and it just, throughout the garden, it's weaved, and I've also got that to a timer, so I can just flip on the timer, and it'll water throughout the garden.
Okay. Now, you laid that down under your carpet.
Correct.
Okay. Now, when we're talking about watering, it kind of ties into another interesting thing you've done, and I understand from your video that this next project you developed helps keep you out of the doghouse. Tell us about that one.
Okay. What I did, I've added a little work area, and what it does is I can take the vegetables over there and clean them up and so forth. So when I go inside, last year I'd come in with gobs of produce and so forth, and I was excited because I was ready to eat them and so forth, but my wife was not quite as excited because they were throughout her kitchen and so forth. And so through the work area, now I'm able to clean up the vegetables and so forth, so when they come in, they're ready to put up or to fix.
Okay, and so you wash them off, and you just put the sink in there and you use your water hose, and then your excess water, you're regenerating that back into your garden and strawberry bin.
Correct.
So very efficient. And with the efficiency, you're also trying a little experiment on your composting. What kind of ideas have you got in mind there?
Well, in composting, I have some large 55-gallon barrels, and they're black, and it's a real heavy vinyl. And it's kind of a tumbler concept, but I figure I can get more heat and so forth, and it would help composting go a little faster.
Okay. Well, you can see that Steve has a lot of great energy efficient ideas that he's sharing with us, and I think they're all very timely, and especially with the environmental issues that we're faced with today. And Steve, I think it's a garden that people can adapt to and get some great ideas too. And to make this official, with us today we have Mr. Bill Smith of Smith's Farm and Garden, and Bill is one of our sponsors for our contest this year. And Bill, you have a presentation to make, don't you?
Yes, I do, Steve. Mr. Lacy, we're certainly pleased to be here today, and on behalf of all the folks at Smith Farm and Garden in Oklahoma City and Tulsa, we'd like to present this plaque to you and your family as the first place winner of the 1991 Home Video Garden Contest with Oklahoma Gardening.
Thank you very much.
Certainly congratulate you, and here is a certificate good for the $500 shopping spree that you and your family can use at Smith Farm and Garden in Oklahoma City or Tulsa.
Well, thank you. We can put this to good use. We've gone through the catalog, and we've got a lot of nice things we're dreaming for here, and this will definitely help out.
Very good. We'll look forward to seeing you then.
Thank you again, Bill. And of course, we've been real excited about doing this year, and of course, the emphasis has been educational ideas, and I think, Steve, you've given us a lot of good ones today, and again, congratulations.
Thank you.
As you may have noticed as we came up the garden path at the beginning of this tour, I used the pond, fountain, and gazebo as focal points for the end of my garden path. Well, in completing the design of my garden, I didn't want visitors to my garden to feel as though they had nothing to look at as they left. So located at the opposite end of my garden pathway is an arbor garden, which contains a center focal point, the statue, backed by lattice and surrounded by hostas, gold flame spireas, and crepe myrtles.
Well, our first place winner in category 2 is Mr. Hal Neely, and Hal has done a great job of converting a backyard in East Tulsa to kind of a tropical paradise. And Hal, welcome to Oklahoma Gardening, and thanks for inviting us out to your home and for submitting an entry. You have done a great job of diversifying a backyard, and I think people will notice that you've got a lot of water gardens and waterfalls and different things like that too. That's kind of the focal point of your garden, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. When I designed the garden, I built it basically around the fish pond.
Okay. Now, one thing, Hal, that you've told me is you have a philosophy about your garden here that you'd like to share with people. What is that philosophy?
Basically, my garden philosophy is plant it, and you can always move it if you decide you don't like it in the spot that you've planted it. Don't be afraid to try and move it, because you're not really out anything if you do move it and it dies.
Right. Well, Hal, let's talk about some of the interesting things that you've got here that are educational that we'd like to share with some of the other viewers. Tell me about the yarrow, what you've done with that.
The yarrow, I like to keep trimmed back low rather than letting it bloom and get tall and spindly. And keeping it trimmed back low, it resembles a fern, but yet it'll grow in full sun.
And of course, that's a perennial, which a lot of your things are perennials or annuals that reseed themselves. So that's an interesting tip for the yarrow. You've also got some cannas that I think you like to use in your garden. And what's the reason for that?
The reason for that is they don't have to be dug up in the winter like most cannas. They seem to winter over well in Oklahoma and come back every year.
And what variety or what type, or what are you referring to those cannas?
I know them as bronze leaf canna.
Okay, as bronze leaf canna. So it's got a nice color contrast for your gardens as well. Now, another plant that you've got that I really like is a rose. Now, what type is that, and why is it so neat to grow?
It's a shrub rose, and it's named Rosa rugosa. And the nice thing about it is it blooms throughout the summer, and then in the fall, instead of trimming back the dead heads, you let them stay on the plant and they ripen to resemble little cherry tomatoes.
Okay, so it gives you a little bit of fall color and transition as well. Now, Hal, you have got so many different plants here. I ask you what your favorite plant is. Tell me what that is and why.
I think as far as the favorite bloom of the plant is the cleome, because it's real spiky and spidery, and it's very tropical looking.
And with the tropics, you've got an umbrella plant, which you've got in your pond, and you're also growing in a container. Tell me how you're doing that and what you do with it over the winter.
They're basically planted in pots, and the ones that are growing in containers are sitting inside a larger pot full of water. And then in the winter, I just take the pots indoors, and the plant tends to die back a little bit, but then again in the spring, it'll come back out.
Okay. So I ask you, you call this low maintenance, don't you?
Yeah, to me it's low maintenance. All I have to do is deadhead the plants and maybe pull an occasional one here and there.
Well, Hal, we'd like to present you with your award now, and with us is Mr. Tim Hendrickson of Smith Farm and Garden. And Tim, I'll let you present Hal with the award there.
Hal, on behalf of Smith Farm and Garden, we'd like to present you with this plaque and this gift certificate for $500.
Well, thank you.
We appreciate it. Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm really honored.
Well, Hal, what are you going to do with that? You got any ideas of plants you want to put in, or?
I'm thinking about a chipper shredder so that I can make more mulch for my flowers.
Okay. Well, good. Anything else that you want to tell us about another plant or anything, Hal, before we?
There's nothing, I mean, it's so hard to pick out a specific one, so.
Right. Well, I think it's just a good garden to show, again, what you can do in Oklahoma. And again, Al's shown us that it's low maintenance. And again, Hal, congratulations.
Thank you, Steve.
Swiss chard here from Burpees. It's the other end of the raised bed. It also has chips on top. All of it has chips on top there, and it's about 20 feet long. There is early glow. This is the first year they were planted. This is also a raised bed. It's got the regular building logs that we use to. And it's 30 feet long and 4 feet wide and 1 feet in height. In bees, there are two hive boxes with 2 supers on top of that. We use the bees here for pollination of our vegetables and our fruits, and it does a very good job. In fact, we've increased our productivity about 20% since we got our bees 2 years ago.
My squash, I prefer the straight yellow straight neck. It's beginning to bloom and to put on quite heavily. I have the yellow, and at the far end, I have the zucchini. Against the fence, I have planted acorn squash so it can bind upon the fence. From these 7 yellow squash and the 6 zucchinis, we give squash by the bushels away all year long. People can't say I have plenty of squash.
Another view of the inside of the yard. Have a bed here for Cummins junipers, kind of the center part of the yard. View of the conifer bed. Flagstone patio. One interesting thing about this yard also is that we have no access to this backyard for machinery. All this has been hand dug, all the rock carried. Probably would have much larger rocks and boulders back here if they were possible to do.
I feel like we should all do our part to help the environment. For several years, I've used a twin blade mulcher. Rather than throwing away the valuable nitrogen, I'd rather recycle it back into the soil by chopping the grass up with the twin blades into a very fine powder-like material. For several years around the Alpes area, I picked up anywhere from 200 to 300 bags of leaves and chopped them in this homemade shredder I built. People call me now in the fall and tell me their leaves are bagged and ready to pick up. I prefer pecan leaves, but I'll take any kind. I built this shredder by cutting a 55-gallon barrel in half. The galvanized cone on the top keeps the air created inside the barrel in a downward movement where it belongs. Inside the barrel, I mounted a motor and attached a pulley to the shaft. When the inexpensive galvanized wires break, I simply thread on a new pair. I brought the side out 2 inches and filled the space with spray foam, which hardened. This keeps the leaves from getting up in this area and keeps the air in a downward movement. The leaves are then chopped and fall through the triangular slit. I would much rather put this deep, rich material back into my flower bed rather than having it hauled to the landfill.
Well, as you can see, the judges had a difficult time, like I mentioned, in trying to decide who the winners were. As a matter of fact, the competition was so close, we had to award 2 honorable mentions for each category. In Category 1, our honorable mentions were Miss Genevieve Connell of Nowata, Oklahoma, and Mrs. Vicki Thomas and her family of McAllister. And in Category 2, our honorable mentions were Mr. Hugh Bright of Bethany, and we had one entry from Elk Falls, Kansas, and that honorable mention went to Mr. Barry McGuire. And again, the competition was very close, and you can tell from the videos that it really is a family type project, and that's real exciting to see moms and dads and the kids out working in the garden and landscape and spending a lot of time, good quality time together. And that's why we try to do some of these youth gardening ideas on the show as well, because we do get feedback that some of the kids like to watch the program. Well, we want to make sure that we thank everybody who sent in an entry. We really appreciate all your time and your efforts and your frustrations in making them. We got a lot of great ideas, and next year we'll be sharing a lot of those with you in the upcoming season.
We hope you've enjoyed this classic from the Oklahoma Gardening Vault. Remember, even though these tips and techniques are timeless, there's always something new to learn in the world of gardening. By subscribing to both Oklahoma Gardening and OK Gardening Classics, you'll have access to a wealth of gardening knowledge, both classic and contemporary.